Admiral Wei stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched his fleet die. The battle had been going well. 3 hours of fighting against the Dominion had pushed the enemy back. Human ships fought alongside vessels from 4 allied species. They held the left flank with their fast destroyers. They brought their heavy cruisers to the center. The covered the right side and rear. Together, they had the surrounded. Then the Allies turned their ships around and left. Wei did not understand what he was seeing at first. The destroyers broke formation and accelerated away from the battle. The cruisers stopped firing and began jumping to hyperspace. Within minutes, every Allied ship was gone or leaving. They did not seem surprised. They reformed their lines with perfect coordination, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Their weapons locked onto human ships that were now exposed on all sides. Admiral, his tactical officer, said, "They knew our allies would leave." Wei understood then. This was not a retreat. This was not confusion or cowardice. This was betrayal planned long before the first shot was fired. "All ships," he said into the fleet communication channel, "fall back to Rally Point 7. Protect the troop carriers. We are leaving." But leaving was not simple. They had positioned themselves perfectly. Every escape route was covered. Human ships exploded one after another as they tried to break through enemy lines. The Resolute shook as missiles struck her shields. Wei watched the death count rise on his display. 10,000 dead, 50,000, 100,000. Each number was a person he had promised to bring home. The troop carriers were the worst. They carried no weapons and had thin armor. They were meant to stay behind the fighting, protected by Allied ships that were now gone. Destroyers tore them apart. Thousands of soldiers died without ever reaching the battle they had trained for. By the time the surviving human ships escaped to hyperspace, 2/3 of the fleet was destroyed. 800,000 humans were dead or dying in the cold space around Prime. Wei sat in his command chair and felt nothing. The shock was too great for emotion. He had led the largest human fleet ever assembled into a trap set by those who called themselves friends. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. In that time, the political situation became clear. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. The 4 allied species that had abandoned humanity at the battle presented a joint resolution. They claimed humans had committed war crimes. They showed fabricated evidence of atrocities that never happened. They demanded that human colonies be placed under protective administration for the safety of the galaxy. The vote passed with overwhelming support. Species that had been neutral now sided against humanity. The betrayer species had promised them pieces of human territory in exchange for their votes. By the time Wei reached Earth, humanity had lost everything outside the Sol system. 15 colonies with a total population of 3 billion people were now under alien occupation. Human citizens were being rounded up and relocated. Human businesses were being seized. Human history and monuments were being erased. The president of Earth called Wei to her office on the day he arrived. "How bad is it?" she asked. "We have 42 warships left," Wei said. "The enemy has over 2,000. They could take Sol whenever they want." "Then why haven't they?" "Because they want us alive. Dead humans are worthless. Living humans can work in their factories and farms. They see us as a resource now, not a threat." The president was quiet for a long time. She looked out her window at the city below. People were going about their lives, not yet understanding what had happened. Soon, they would learn that humanity was now a conquered species in everything but name. "I have something to show you," she said finally. She led him to an elevator that went deep underground. They passed through security checkpoints that Wei did not know existed. The elevator descended for nearly 10 minutes before stopping. They stepped out into a massive chamber carved from solid rock. Thousands of people worked at computer stations. Screens showed data from across the galaxy. Maps displayed the location of every human being still alive outside Sol. "This is Project Omega," the president said. "We started building it 80 years ago after first contact. We hoped we would never need it." Wei looked at the screens. He saw lists of names and locations. He saw network diagrams showing connections between systems. He saw files on every species in the galaxy, every government, every corporation. "What is this?" he asked. "Insurance," the president said. "For 80 years we have been placing people in positions throughout the galaxy, engineers who maintain critical systems, merchants who run trade routes, technicians who build communication networks, scientists who work in research facilities. They are all loyal to humanity first." Wei began to understand. Sleeper agents. More than that, we have been making ourselves essential. Every species in the galaxy uses human technology in some form. Human code runs their systems. Human engineers keep their infrastructure working. Human merchants move their goods. They don't even notice because we made ourselves invisible. How many people? 2 million, spread across every major system. They have been waiting for a signal that we hoped would never come. Wei thought about what this meant. The galaxy had betrayed humanity and taken everything. But humanity had been preparing for betrayal long before it happened. Somewhere in the minds of human leaders, there had always been the knowledge that trust was temporary. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we wait," the president said. "We let them think they have won. We let them grow comfortable. We let them forget that we are anything more than a defeated species. And while they forget, our people become more essential every year. They promote our engineers to higher positions. They give our merchants bigger contracts. They trust our technicians with more critical systems." "How long?" 10 years, maybe more, until we control enough of the galaxy's infrastructure that they cannot function without us. Wei felt something stir in his chest. It was not hope exactly. It was darker than hope. It was the cold certainty that humanity would have its answer for what happened today. "And then," the president smiled, but there was no warmth in it, "then we teach them what betrayal really costs." Wei nodded slowly. He thought about the 800,000 dead. He thought about the 3 billion humans now living under occupation. He thought about his own crew, the ones who had trusted him and died for that trust. "Send the signal," he said. "Activate Protocol Omega." The president typed a command into a secure terminal. Somewhere in the depths of the system, an encrypted message began traveling outward. It moved through hidden relays and secret channels. It reached 2 million humans scattered across 1,000 worlds. The message was simple, just 2 words. "Begin operations." On colony worlds and space stations, in corporate offices and government buildings, 2 million humans received the signal and understood. The galaxy had betrayed them. Now they would show the galaxy what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose. The war was over. Humanity had lost. The real work was just beginning. 10 years passed, and the galaxy forgot about humanity. The betrayer species grew rich on stolen human colonies. They converted human cities into factories. They turned human farms into plantations. They used human knowledge and human technology to build empires greater than anything they had achieved alone. They became the dominant military power. With human shipyards producing their vessels, their fleet tripled in size. They conquered 3 smaller species and added their worlds to their territory. They became the wealthiest species in known space. Human financial systems, designed by human programmers and maintained by human technicians, processed every major transaction in the galaxy. They took credit for the prosperity they had stolen. They divided the outer regions between them. They grew comfortable in their new power. They attended parties and signed treaties and spoke of peace and cooperation. They never mentioned the 800,000 humans who died to give them their wealth. Sol's system remained quiet. Human ships stayed within their borders. Human diplomats stopped attending galactic meetings. Human merchants continued their trade routes, never causing trouble, never demanding justice. The galaxy decided that humanity had accepted its defeat. Vex was an intelligence officer, and she was the first to notice that something was wrong. It started with small things. A power station on a world failed for 3 hours. The official report blamed old equipment, but saw that the station had been serviced by human technicians just days before the failure. Then a military satellite went offline for 12 minutes. In that time, 3 surveillance feeds went dark. When the satellite came back, the technicians could not explain what had happened. The maintenance logs showed the last person to access the system was a human contractor. Began collecting incidents. A database error that deleted financial records on Prime. A communication relay that broadcast random static for an hour. A jump gate that refused to activate for certain ships. Each incident was minor. Each incident was explained away. And each incident involved humans somewhere in the chain. She brought her findings to her superior. "You are seeing patterns that do not exist," he told her. "Humans are broken, they have no power. These are coincidences." 37 coincidences in 6 months, all involving human workers. Human workers are everywhere. They maintain half the infrastructure in the galaxy. Of course they are present when things break. That does not mean they cause the problems. Was not convinced, but she had no proof. She returned to her work and kept watching. The incidents continued. A senator died of heart failure. The medical report showed no foul play, but discovered that his personal physician was human, and the senator had been pushing for harsher restrictions on human workers. An admiral resigned suddenly, citing family reasons. 2 weeks later, records leaked showing he had taken bribes during the war. The leak came from a secure system maintained by human programmers. And corporation collapsed when its accounting errors became public. The company had been built on seized human assets. The auditor who discovered the errors was human. Saw the pattern clearly now. Humans were not broken, they were hunting. She spent months tracking human workers across the galaxy. What she found terrified her. Humans held positions in every critical system. They maintained the power grids that lit cities. They programmed the networks that carried communications. They serviced the jump gates that connected worlds. They managed the databases that tracked finances and populations and military movements. They had made themselves invisible by being everywhere. No one noticed them because everyone depended on them. They were the workers in the background, the technicians in the basement, the engineers who kept everything running. And they were all connected. Found traces of hidden communication channels buried in the systems humans maintained. The messages were encrypted with codes she could not break, but she could see the traffic patterns. 2 million humans spread across the galaxy, all talking to each other through secret networks. She tried again to warn her superiors. "The humans have infiltrated everything," she said. "They control our infrastructure. If they wanted to, they could shut down half the galaxy." Her superior laughed. "Shut down the galaxy? With what? They have no ships, no weapons, no army. They are laborers and technicians. They fix things. They do not destroy them. That is exactly what makes them dangerous. We cannot function without them. Every species in the galaxy depends on human workers. If they stopped working, we would collapse. Then we would force them to work. We have armies, they have nothing. Armies need communication networks. They need power. They need supply lines. Humans maintain all of those things." Her superior dismissed her concerns, was reassigned to a minor post monitoring traffic violations. Her files were buried in classified archives that no one would ever read. But kept watching. She saw humans promoted to higher positions. She saw them given access to more critical systems. She saw them become essential to operations that species had thought they controlled. And she saw them waiting. Humans never complained anymore. They never demanded the return of their colonies. They never spoke of justice or revenge. They simply worked, quietly and efficiently, making themselves more valuable every day. Understood what they were doing. They were building a trap so large that the entire galaxy was inside it, and no one else could see it because no one wanted to look. On the 10th anniversary of the betrayal, received a message. It came through official channels, but the sender was anonymous. The message contained a single image. It showed a web of connections spanning the galaxy. Every major system, every critical network, every essential service. And at the center of every connection was a human. Below the image were words that made blood run cold. "You are the only one who noticed. You have been watching us. We have been watching you too. Tomorrow everything changes. We wanted you to understand why." Tried to send warnings. She called her former superiors. She contacted military commanders. She reached out to intelligence agencies across every species. No one believed her. The next morning she woke to darkness. The power grid was offline. Her communication device showed no signal. Outside her window, the city was silent and black. Walked to her balcony and looked up at the sky. There were no satellites visible, no ships moving between the stars, no lights from orbital stations. The galaxy had gone dark. And somewhere, she knew, 2 million humans were watching their work finally begin. The day the galaxy stopped began like any other. On Prime, workers traveled to their jobs through transit systems that ran on human-designed software. On Worlds, businesses opened their doors using security systems installed by human technicians. On stations, life support hummed quietly under the care of human engineers. Then, at exactly the same moment across every system, everything stopped. Power grids failed. Communication networks went silent. Jump gates locked their doors and refused to open. Traffic control systems showed only error messages. Banking networks forgot how to move money. Military command centers lost contact with their fleets. There was no explosion, no attack, no warning, just silence. Admiral Wei, now 73 years old, stood in the command center on Earth and watched the reports come in. His hair had turned white in the 10 years since the betrayal. His face carried lines of grief and patience, but his eyes were sharp, and they showed no mercy. "Status report," he said. "All primary targets are offline," his operations officer reported. Power grids across 412 worlds. Communication networks serving 2,000 systems. 93% of all jump gates. Financial networks processing 87% of galactic transactions. Casualties. Minimal so far. We shut down life support on military installations only. Civilian systems have backup power. They will last a few hours. Wei nodded. Humanity had waited 10 years for this moment. They had planned every detail. They knew exactly how much damage to cause and how much to hold back. Across the galaxy, panic spread faster than light. On Prime, the military tried to respond to what they assumed was an attack, but their ships could not communicate with each other. Their weapons could not receive targeting data. Their soldiers could not coordinate movements. They were blind and deaf and paralyzed. On Worlds, the wealthy discovered that their money was gone. Not stolen, just frozen. Every account, every investment, every asset sat locked in databases that refused to respond. The entire economy of the richest species in the galaxy existed only as numbers in human-controlled systems. On stations, people crowded around emergency broadcasts that showed nothing but static. They did not know if they were under attack or if the universe itself had broken. They only knew that everything they depended on had stopped working. The Galactic Council tried to hold an emergency session, but the council chamber had no power. Representatives gathered in the dark, using chemical lights to see each other's faces. They shouted and blamed and demanded explanations that no one could give. Then the screens came back on. Every display in the galaxy showed the same image: an old human man in a simple uniform, sitting in a plain room. Admiral Wei looked into the camera and spoke. "My name is Wei. 10 years ago, your species betrayed humanity. You left 800,000 of my people to die. You stole our colonies. You enslaved our citizens. You erased our history and took our future." He paused to let the words sink in. "You thought we were broken. You thought we had accepted defeat. You were wrong. For 10 years, we have been building something you never expected. Not a fleet, not an army, something far more powerful. We built ourselves into the systems you depend on. We became the engineers who maintain your power grids. We became the programmers who run your networks. We became the technicians who keep your ships flying and your stations breathing. You cannot eat without food that moves through supply chains we control. You cannot communicate without networks we maintain. You cannot travel without jump gates we operate. You cannot even see this message without technology that humans designed and humans service. We did not conquer you with weapons. We conquered you by making ourselves essential, and now we have stopped working." The representatives in the council chamber stared at the screen in horror. They understood now what had happened. Humanity had not been defeated. Humanity had been waiting. "This is not revenge," Wei continued. "Revenge would mean destroying you. We could do that. We could shut down life support on every station. We could crash every ship in flight. We could collapse every economy and watch your civilizations tear themselves apart. But we are not monsters. We are humans, and we want something more than destruction." He leaned forward. "Here are our terms. First, all human colonies will be returned immediately. Every human citizen currently under occupation will be freed. Second, the species that betrayed us will pay reparations calculated by human accountants and by neutral observers. Third, the Galactic Council will be restructured. Humans will hold permanent oversight positions in all critical systems. Nothing will happen in this galaxy without human approval. You have 1 hour to accept these terms. After 1 hour, we will begin shutting down systems permanently. We will start with military installations. Then we will move to industrial centers, then to civilian infrastructure. We can keep this going for months. You cannot. This is not negotiation. This is notification. The galaxy now belongs to humanity. You may continue to live in it as long as you follow our rules." The screen went dark. In the council chamber, representatives erupted into chaos. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for surrender. Some wept. Some prayed. Some sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had happened. The military commander stood and shouted for war. He said they would find the human workers and force them to restore systems. He said they would invade Sol and burn Earth to ash. Then the lights flickered. A soft tone played through the speakers. A calm human voice spoke. "We heard that. Commander, we control the life support in your personal quarters. Your family is there right now. Choose your next words carefully." The commander sat down. He did not speak again. One by one, the representatives understood their position. They could not fight an enemy that was already inside their homes, their offices, their ships. They could not threaten people who controlled whether they lived or died. They had ruled the galaxy for 10 years by exploiting humanity's trust. Now they were trapped by their own dependence on human skills. The hour passed slowly. When it ended, the Galactic Council formally accepted all human terms. There was no celebration on Earth. Wei watched the surrender message and felt no joy. He thought about the 800,000 dead. He thought about the years of occupation and suffering. He thought about what humanity had become in order to survive. They had won, but the victory tasted like ash. "What now?" his aide asked. Now comes the hard part, Wei said. We have seized a galaxy. We have to figure out what to do with it. He turned away from the screens and walked out of the command center. Behind him, a galaxy waited to learn what their new human masters would demand. The Human Oversight Authority began operations 3 days after the surrender. There were no invasions, no occupying armies, no soldiers marching through conquered cities. Instead, there were auditors. Thousands of human officials spread across the galaxy with access to every database, every financial record, every classified file. They exposed everything. On Prime, broadcasts revealed the secret negotiations that led to the betrayal. Citizens watched recordings of their leaders laughing about human deaths. They heard their generals discuss how to divide human colonies. They saw the bribes paid and the promises made. Within a week, the government collapsed. Angry crowds stormed government buildings. Military officers were dragged from their homes. The species that had built the largest fleet in the galaxy tore itself apart from the inside. Humanity did not fire a single shot. On Worlds, financial records showed centuries of corruption. The wealthy families that ruled the economy had stolen from their own people. They had hidden funds in secret accounts. They had manipulated markets to destroy competitors. They had used human systems to commit crimes they thought no one would ever discover. Humans discovered everything. The economy crashed, not because humans shut down their systems, but because their own citizens stopped trusting their institutions. Banks failed as people their money. Corporations collapsed as investors fled. The richest species in the galaxy became poor overnight. The UN faced similar revelations. Every dirty secret, every hidden crime, every betrayal was dragged into the light. Human auditors worked without mercy. They had access to systems that species had believed were secure. Nothing was hidden anymore. Vex watched the chaos from her small apartment on a colony world. She had expected to be arrested or killed when the humans took control. Instead, a human official visited her office the day after the surrender. "We know you tried to warn them," the official said. "We have been watching you for years." "Are you here to punish me?" asked. "We are here to offer you a job. Join the Oversight Authority as a liaison officer." Her job was to help her species adjust to human rule. She worked alongside humans who had spent years hiding among her people. She learned their names and their stories. Some had lived as for decades. They had learned the language, followed the customs, built lives that seemed completely normal. They had married spouses and raised children who did not know their parents were human agents. They had sacrificed everything for a mission that might never have come. "Do you hate us?" asked a human engineer she worked with. His name was. He had maintained military systems for 15 years. "I did," he admitted. "When I watched your ships leave the battle, when I heard about the camps where humans were held, when I saw my people treated like animals, yes, I hated you. And now I just want it to be over. I want to go home. I want to see my real family. I have spent half my life pretending to be someone else. I am tired." Understood. The humans had won, but victory had cost them years of their lives. They had lived in constant fear of discovery. They had built relationships they knew were false. They had become strangers to their own identities. Not everyone accepted human rule peacefully. Resistance groups formed on several worlds. They attacked human facilities. They assassinated human officials. They called for war against the oppressors. The response was swift but strange. Humans did not send soldiers. They simply stopped providing services to hostile regions. Power grids stayed offline. Communication networks remained dark. Food shipments were delayed. Medicine ran short. The message was clear. Cooperation meant comfort. Resistance meant suffering. Local populations turned against the resistance. They did not want to live without power. They did not want their children hungry. They did not want to die for leaders who had brought disaster upon them. They handed over resistance fighters in exchange for restored services. Within 6 months, organized resistance collapsed, not through military defeat but through social pressure. Humans had learned that the strongest weapon was not destruction, it was necessity. The galaxy settled into an uneasy peace. Human officials oversaw every major institution. Human approval was required for any significant decision. Human auditors watched every transaction. Human engineers maintained every system. Some species resented the control. They complained about human arrogance. They protested human interference. They demanded independence and self-determination. Others were quietly grateful. The corruption that had plagued their societies for centuries was finally exposed. The leaders who had exploited them were finally punished. The systems that had failed them were finally working properly. Found herself in a strange position. She had been an intelligence officer for a species that betrayed humanity. Now she worked for humans who had conquered her people. She was neither prisoner nor collaborator. She was something in between. One day she asked a question that had bothered her for months. What makes you different from the leaders you replaced? They controlled everything too. They claimed to be protecting the galaxy. How are humans any different? Was quiet for a long time. I do not know if we are different, he finally said. Maybe we are just the next empire. Maybe in 100 years someone will overthrow us the same way we overthrew them. That does not answer my question. Because there is no good answer. We did what we had to do to survive. Now we have power we never wanted. We control a galaxy we never asked to rule. We are making decisions that affect billions of lives, and we do not know if we are making the right choices. He looked at her with tired eyes. The only thing I know for certain is that we cannot go back. We cannot give up control and trust that no one will betray us again. We cannot forget what happened. So we move forward and hope that we become better rulers than the ones we replaced. Thought about his words. She thought about her own species and their crimes. She thought about the galaxy before and after human rule. Maybe there were no good answers. Maybe power always corrupted. Maybe every empire eventually fell. But for now, humanity held the galaxy, and the galaxy had no choice but to wait and see what kind of masters humans would become. 5 years after the seizure, Admiral Wei returned to the site of the betrayal. The debris field still existed, scattered across millions of kilometers of empty space. 800,000 humans had died here. Their ships had become tombs, drifting silently through the void. Wei was 83 now. His body had weakened, but his mind remained sharp. He stood at the observation window of his personal transport and looked at the wreckage of his fleet. "Admiral, you have a visitor," his aide announced. Wei turned to find a young woman in the uniform of the Oversight Authority. Her name was Lieutenant, no relation despite the shared name. She was 26 years old, born after the betrayal, raised in a galaxy where humanity ruled. "You requested a meeting," Wei said. "What do you want to discuss?" Hesitated. She had prepared for this conversation for weeks, but facing the legendary admiral made her nervous. "I want to understand, sir. I grew up hearing stories about the betrayal and the seizure, but I do not understand why we still control everything." "Because we must." "Must we? The war ended 15 years ago. The species that betrayed us have been humiliated and reformed. Their corrupt leaders are gone. New governments have emerged. Why do we still act like they are our enemies?" Wei studied the young officer. She represented a generation that did not remember the fear and grief of the betrayal. To her, human dominance was simply the way things were. "Do you know what happened to the humans who lived on the occupied colonies?" he asked. "They were freed after the seizure. Before that, during the 10 years of occupation." Knew the history, but she had never heard Wei speak of it directly. "They were forced to work. Their rights were restricted." They were slaves, Wei said flatly. 3 billion humans lived as property for 10 years. They were separated from their families. They were beaten for minor offenses. They were killed when they became inconvenient. Children were taken from parents and raised to serve alien masters. He turned back to the window. I have read the reports from every colony. I have seen the mass graves. I have talked to survivors who cannot sleep without nightmares. And you ask me why we do not trust the galaxy. Felt the weight of his words. I understand the pain, sir, but we cannot hold the galaxy hostage forever because of what happened in the past. Can we not? The galaxy held us hostage for 10 years. They did not release us out of kindness. They released us because we forced them to. If we give up control, what stops them from doing it again? Maybe nothing stops them. Maybe we have to take that risk. Wei was silent for a long moment. Then he did something did not expect. He laughed. You sound like my daughter. She says the same things. She thinks I am an old man holding onto old grudges. Are you? Perhaps, but old men remember what young people forget. We remember that trust can be broken. We remember that allies can become enemies overnight. We remember that the galaxy watched us die and did nothing. Stepped closer to the window. She looked at the debris field, the graves of 800,000 people she never knew. My father was born on one of the occupied colonies, she said. He was 5 when the aliens came. He grew up as a servant in a household. He does not talk about those years, but I know they shaped him. Wei looked at her with new interest. And what does he think about human rule? He thinks it is necessary. He says we can never be safe unless we control everything. He says the galaxy will always try to destroy us if we give them the chance. You disagree with him. I think fear makes bad policy. We seized the galaxy because we were afraid. We hold on to it because we are still afraid. But fear cannot be the foundation of civilization. Eventually, we have to find something else. Wei turned away from the window. He walked to a chair and sat down heavily. The years showed in his movements. You are right, he said quietly. Fear is not enough. I have known that for years, but I do not know what comes next. Sat across from him. Maybe that is the question we should be asking. Not how to control the galaxy, but how to build something that does not need control. Something based on genuine cooperation instead of forced compliance. The galaxy betrayed us once. They will do it again. Maybe, or maybe they have changed. Maybe living under human oversight for 5 years has taught them something. Maybe the next generation of their leaders will be different. You have more faith than I do. Someone has to, sir. You and your generation carried the burden of survival. You did what was necessary. But my generation has to carry the burden of building something better. We cannot do that if we are still fighting the last war. Wei was quiet for a long time. He looked at the debris field, at the graves of his fallen soldiers. He thought about everything humanity had done to survive and everything they had become. What would you have me do? He asked. Start letting go. Begin transferring control to new institutions. Not immediately, not completely. But show the galaxy that we are willing to trust again. Show them that human rule is not permanent. Give them something to work toward. And if they betray us again? Smiled sadly. Then we know we tried, we know we gave them a chance to be better, and we respond accordingly, but at least we tried. Wei nodded slowly. You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago, a young officer who believed that humanity could do great things, who believed we were capable of more than just survival. What happened to him? He watched his fleet die. He spent 10 years building a weapon of revenge. He used that weapon to conquer a galaxy, and somewhere along the way he forgot what he was fighting for. He stood and looked out with eyes that carried decades of grief. Maybe it is time to remember. 1 month later, Admiral Wei announced the transition initiative. Human oversight would be gradually reduced over the next 20 years. New governing bodies would be created with representatives from all species. Humans would step back from direct control and become advisors instead of rulers. The galaxy reacted with shock and hope. Some species celebrated, others worried it was a trap. Some humans protested, afraid of what would happen when they lost their power. Vex was present at the announcement ceremony. She stood next to her human colleague and friend. They had worked together for 5 years, navigating the strange new reality of human dominance. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "I do not know," admitted, "but I know we cannot keep living like this. Controlling everything is exhausting. We are not meant to be emperors." "What are you meant to be?" Thought about the question. Neighbors, maybe, partners, members of something larger than ourselves. We spent so long preparing for betrayal that we forgot how to hope for anything else. And now we try something different. We take a risk. We trust, even though we have every reason not to. On the observation deck, Wei watched the proceedings. His daughter stood beside him, holding her young son. The boy looked up at his grandfather with curious eyes. "What is happening, grandfather?" Wei smiled at the child. "We are trying something new. We are trying to build a galaxy where everyone works together." "Will it work?" Wei looked out at the stars, at the vast universe that humanity had seized and now prepared to release. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but we have to try. That is what being human means. We make mistakes, we suffer, we learn, and then we try again." The boy nodded as if he understood. Maybe he did. Children often understood things that adults had forgotten. Somewhere in the galaxy, a new chapter was beginning. Not an ending, not a victory, not a defeat. Just another step on a journey that had no destination. Humanity had survived betrayal. They had conquered their enemies. Now they faced the hardest challenge of all. Learning to live in peace.